Stop being a coward, Kelly. Obsolete operators hide behind alarms. Brent Halverson said it loud enough to cut through two running trim presses and the hiss of dye lube, and he made sure he said it where everyone could hear. Cell 7's stack light flashed red over his shoulder, in strict 3-second pulses, turning his face red, then normal, then red again, like the machine itself was calling him a liar. Kelly Sullivan stood on the operator platform, with her gloves clipped to her belt and her safety glasses fogged at the edges from heat. And for one hard second she did not answer at all. She watched his fingers stabbing at the HMI screen where Interlock fault. Clamp inhibit glowed in block letters. She could smell hot hydraulic fluid, release agent, and the faint metallic sweetness that lived around molten aluminum. The insult was not new. The audience was. Night shift at Ironclad Components in Toledo ran lean and loud, and humiliation traveled faster than forklifts. Luis from Utility stood half a step behind Halverson, eyes moving between them, trying not to be seen watching. Two maintenance techs were on the lower deck, one with a laptop cart connected to Cell 7's PLC cabinet, pretending to check trend logs while listening to every word. Near the aisle, a material handler slowed with an empty rack just enough to catch the scene, then rolled on. Kelly felt the old pressure move settle into place. Isolate the expert, frame caution as weakness, convert procedure into attitude. Halverson used the same play every quarter end when shipping numbers slipped. She climbed down from the platform instead of shouting from above. That choice mattered on a shop floor. Raised voices from elevated steel became theater. Flat voices at eye level became testimony. She stopped just outside the yellow boundary line painted around the clamping envelope and squared her shoulders toward him. Her pulse had jumped with the insult, but her face stayed composed in the way 14 years of furnace heat had taught it to stay composed. Say what you need to say, she told him, calm enough that Luis finally looked straight at her. But don't call a live interlock a fake alarm. Halverson gave a short laugh meant for the crew, not for her. He was clean by foundry standards. Pressed navy button-down, hard hat with no scratches, white reflective vest that still looked bright at the end of shift. He carried a tablet in one hand and the bypass key pouch clipped where his radio should have been. I'm calling it what it is, he said. A nuisance fault. We are behind 2 trailers. You've been babying this cell all week. We need output, not lectures. Kelly glanced at the HMI, then back to him. She knew this exact machine better than he knew his own bonus worksheet. Cell 7 was a 1,600-ton cold chamber die-cast machine, with a shot sleeve the length of her arm and tie bars thick as bridge posts. On a stable cycle, it could fill, intensify, cool, open, eject, and reset with clean rhythm for hours. On an unstable cycle, it became a steel argument with no patience for ego. The clamp inhibit interlock was not decorative software. It was an automated refusal coded after earlier generations of injuries and lawsuits across the industry. If die temperature deltas drifted beyond tolerance, if verification tags disagreed, if the process map saw risk, the machine denied closure. The message in red was the system doing its job. Call me cautious, she said. Call me slow if you want, but don't call me wrong. He stepped closer, voice sharpening. You are wrong when you stall production for a blinking icon. You know what obsolete means, Kelly? It means people who learned one machine in 2010 and never adapted. It means hiding behind old stories while the rest of us hit targets. The word landed harder than coward. Coward was Crude pressure language, almost routine. Obsolete was a status attack. It said she had no place in the next shift, the next budget, the next year. Around them, the noise of the plant kept moving. Late alarm cycling on cell 5, compressor surge in the utility bay, forklift backup alarms echoing off concrete. Yet inside the yellow lines around cell 7, the confrontation narrowed to 3 faces and 1 red light. Kelly felt heat rising under her collar, anger mixed with that cleaner emotion she trusted more. Professional alarm. She did not raise her voice. "My name is Kelly Sullivan," she said, enunciating each word the way she did during incident interviews. "Senior die cast technician, 14 years in high-pressure aluminum. I make $94,000 a year because I keep molten metal inside steel where it belongs." She tapped the edge of the console, not the fault banner itself. "This interlock is blocking clamp closure for a reason. That reason matters more than your schedule board." The maintenance tech nearest the cabinet glanced up. Halverson noticed and turned the performance up another notch. "Listen to that," he called over his shoulder. "Credential speech. We don't have time for ceremony." He faced Kelly again, jaw set. "I'm giving you a direct order. Reset and run. 1 verification shot, then continuous. Do your job." Kelly held his gaze. "No." Luis shifted his weight. The words seemed to pull oxygen out of the small space around the console. Halverson's expression changed from contempt to calculation in a single beat, as if he were flipping from one tab to the next in his tablet. "No?" he repeated. "No," she said again, still steady. "Not with that fault active." He leaned in, invading her space by inches. "You're refusing management direction during a shipping emergency." "I'm refusing an unsafe command on a locked interlock." He lifted his hand and pointed at the red stack light without looking at it. "That light is killing throughput. That light is preventing a bad cycle." He smiled without warmth. "You always think catastrophe is 1 button away," she answered before he could continue. "In this process, it can be." He opened his mouth, but she kept going because she had learned that if she paused, he would turn her caution into a personality defect in front of the floor. "You want a short version? Here it is. We are not at thermal balance. Preheat is low on 1/2. Sensor drift is still unresolved on ejector side. If there's moisture trapped in a channel and we inject at full pressure, expansion is faster than human reaction. That is mechanism, not mood." Halverson exhaled hard through his nose. "You're doing it again?" "Paragraphs. The machine is fine. The machine is refusing to run. The machine is wrong." For the first time, Kelly let a flash of disbelief show. Not drama, just disbelief at hearing a manager declare a safety circuit incorrect because the shipping dock was full. She looked at the warning stack light. Then she looked back at him. That small 2-step glance was deliberate, almost ritual. Evidence, then authority. Reality, then hierarchy. She had done it in union meetings, in audits, in one workers' comp hearing years ago. It centered her. By the 2nd week of October, that red pulse had already cost them dozens of scheduled shots and 1 weekend overtime block. And everyone on shift knew Brent was being measured against it. Kelly knew it too. She also knew pressure targets did not alter phase change, vapor expansion, or metal fatigue. Physics did not read email directives, and molten aluminum did not care who signed the payroll approvals. Halverson's radio crackled with dock chatter. "Trailer B staged at Bay 4, someone said. He muted it with his thumb and gave her a flat stare. "I am not arguing theory with you on the floor. You have two choices. Run Cell 7 now, or step away and let someone who wants this job do it. Kelly heard the framing instantly. Obedience equals commitment. Caution equals disloyalty. The move was old, and it worked on tired crews because most people were one paycheck from trouble. She was not rich, and she still had a mortgage. But fear had never improved her process judgment. She kept her hands visible at her sides, open palms, no sudden gestures. If someone else runs it with that fault, that decision is on management. Put it in writing. You don't get to demand paperwork in the middle of a crisis. I get to protect myself when you order a bypass. His eyes narrowed at the word bypass. Nobody said bypass. You brought the key pouch. He looked down involuntarily, then snapped his gaze back. Luis noticed too. So did the maintenance tech at the cabinet, who stopped typing for 2 full seconds. Halverson recovered quickly and pivoted to aggression. I keep keys because I manage equipment. You keep keys because you plan to override. He barked a laugh, but it had strain in it now. You know what your problem is? You think this plant survives on caution speeches. It survives on shipped parts. It survives on not detonating a die set. Don't be dramatic. Don't be reckless. The words hung there, tight and cold, despite the heat rolling off the machine. Somewhere behind them, a mold change hoist beeped in reverse. Overhead sodium lamps threw hard reflections on the polished tie bars, and every pulse of the red stack light painted their helmets like hazard beacons in a training video no one wanted to star in. Kelly could feel the crew watching without turning to look. She also felt a deeper sting beneath the anger. Insult from someone who depended on her judgment. Every night he chose to forget until it blocked him. Halverson finally stepped back half a pace and shifted to a louder, managerial tone, meant to close the scene on his terms. All right, you're relieved from Cell 7 pending review for insubordination. Hand over your operator card. Kelly did not move right away. She reached to her chest pocket, took out the card, and held it between 2 fingers for a moment before placing it on the console ledge beside the emergency stop. No theatrics, no slam. Log this correctly, she said. I refused an unsafe operation with active interlock fault. He gave a dismissive snort. I'll log what happened. You'll log your order. He ignored that, turned toward Luis, and crooked a finger. You, on station, were running. Luis hesitated, then nodded once, small and uncertain. Kelly saw his throat work as he swallowed. He was probationary 6 months in, still learning which alarms were process noise and which alarms were history, trying to prevent a repeat. She met his eyes for a brief second, and in that look, she put every warning she could without escalating him into direct conflict with a manager. He gave the tiniest acknowledgement, then looked away. Halverson clipped the card to his tablet case and strode toward the maintenance cart. Clear that nuisance class and prep a restart, he told the techs. Now. Kelly stepped backward beyond the yellow line and kept walking until she reached the aisle by the scrap hopper. She stopped there, under the hum of a flickering fixture, and watched Cell 7 from a distance, where no one could claim she interfered. Her hands were steady, her jaw was tight. The insult still rang in her ears, but underneath it ran a stronger line, hard as steel. He thought shame would force compliance. She knew better. On this floor, words could bruise pride. Bad commands could break machines. She stayed by the scrap hopper and forced herself to watch the cell like an inspector not like someone who had just been publicly stripped off her station. The distinction mattered. Hurt feelings did not enter root cause reports. Data did. From that angle, she could see the full envelope. Furnace on the left, shot end centered, die face behind guarding, PLC cabinet open with a maintenance laptop tethered in. Red light still pulsing. Alarm horn muted, but the silence was worse because it made every mechanical sound legible. Cooling pump whine at a higher pitch than normal. Spray manifold ticking between bursts. Clamp hydraulics idling with a faint pulse that came every 5 seconds, like the machine was holding its breath against an order it did not agree with. Kelly pulled her own tablet from her locker tote, thumbed in her passcode, and opened the historian trend for Cell 7. If Brent was going to turn a safeguard into a nuisance, she wanted the trace captured before someone sanitized tags. The graph loaded in staggered lines. Cover side die temp, ejector side die temp, shot sleeve temp, clamp tonnage verification, and the interlock status bit. She zoomed the last 20 minutes and felt her jaw lock tighter. Cover side held near 261 degrees Celsius. Ejector side wandered at 218 degrees Celsius, then 221, then dropped to 216 before bouncing back. Spec window was 250 to 265 with less than 10 degrees Celsius differential at clamp close. They were running more than 40 degrees Celsius split. The red interlock was not strict. It was late. A forklift rolled past with empty dunnage, and its headlights briefly swept the platform. Under that sweep, she saw another detail she had missed while arguing. A dark, wet crescent under the ejector side lower channel access, no wider than a hand, beading at the edge of the drain grate. Not a flood, not a hose burst, just repeat seepage. Enough to matter. In die casting, a little water was shop floor mythology that got people hurt. Water trapped in steel channels sat quietly until molten aluminum arrived. Then phase change did its work in milliseconds. Liquid became steam. Steam needed space. If it did not get space, pressure found a weak path and made one. She walked to the perimeter gate and stopped at the painted boundary. "Janelle," she called to the maintenance tech at the cabinet, keeping her tone neutral. "Pull channel C4 flow and return temp for the last hour." Janelle glanced at Brent first. Brent did not answer her. He kept staring at his tablet as if numbers there, outranked numbers in front of him. Janelle gave a tiny shrug and said, "I'm on manager instruction set right now." "Then just look at the floor under C4, Kelly said. "You've got seepage." Brent cut in without turning. "Do not coach from the sidelines, Kelly. I'm flagging active process risk. You're off the cell." Janelle finally looked down where Kelly pointed. Her expression changed for half a second, that involuntary technician reaction when pattern recognition beats politics. "I see moisture," she said quietly. Brent snapped his head around. "Condensation from spray. Keep moving." Kelly answered before Janelle could get boxed in. "Spray condensate doesn't pool at the return fitting with pump idle. It beads at the die face and evaporates. This is channel side seepage." No one replied. Brent gestured at the laptop. "Clear alarm class and proceed to manual sequence." On the wall clock above the tool crib door, the minute hand clicked to 2:47 a.m. Luis climbed the platform steps with a care that told Kelly he understood enough to be afraid. He slid into her old stance at the HMI, hands hovering, not touching yet. Brent stood to his right, close enough to override any hesitation with body pressure alone. Janelle typed through maintenance access menus. Security level escalation. Interlock diagnostics page. Acknowledgement tree. Kelly could read enough from 10 meters out to know they were not fixing anything. They were reclassifying. Status bit 17 went from hard inhibit to maint override armed. The red banner stayed, but a second line appeared beneath it in amber. Operator AC required. Kelly started recording her screen and narrated in a low voice for chain of custody clarity, date, and machine ID first. Cell 7 interlock override arming with unresolved thermal differential and visible channel seepage. She panned the camera to include the wall clock, then the stack light. Evidence had to be boring to be useful. Drama got dismissed. Timestamps stayed. As Luis reached for the acknowledgement soft key, Kelly saw the lift sling hanging on the nearby die change jib. One leg was fuzzed halfway through the outer braid, bright fibers exposed where it had rubbed a sharp edge. Not part of the immediate shot cycle, but same pattern. Degradation normalized, until failure became a calendar item. She walked to the jib post, grabbed a red lockout tag from the board and tied it through the sling eye. Out of service. Frayed leg, do not lift. She signed it, added time, and photographed it in place. If someone cut the tag later, she wanted the first image. Behind her, Brent said, "What are you doing now?" "Tagging defective rigging," she replied without turning. "That's still allowed, right?" He did not answer. The omission was answer enough. When she faced Cell 7 again, Luis had acknowledged the override screen, but had not hit cycle start. He was staring at the die temp panel. Maybe because she had trained him on those numbers during his second month. Kelly read the panel too. Ejector thermocouple T3 was drifting in a jagged sawtooth, 12 degrees up, 9 down, 11 up, with no corresponding spray event. Sensor drift could come from a failing junction, cracked insulation near the lead, or intermittent contact at terminal blocks. Any of those made closed-loop control lie to itself. The machine would think it had balance when it did not. "Luis," she called, careful to keep it technical, not emotional. "Compare T3 with handheld pyrometer before first shot. You need independent temperature on ejector insert." Brent stepped between them visually, one palm up like he was blocking traffic. "No crosstalk, he has instructions." Luis swallowed and asked Brent, not Kelly, "Should I verify with handheld?" Brent said, "No, we're already late." Kelly felt anger climb again, hot and clean. She pushed it down into process language. Then at least run dry clamp and check tonnage trace. If the clamp closes uneven, it tells you die halves are not seating evenly. Brent turned toward her. "You don't get to run this cell from the aisle. You don't get to erase mechanics with a deadline." For a moment, she thought he would order security to walk her out. Instead, he looked away and tapped his radio. "Quality, this is Halverson on 7. We are resuming production after nuisance alarm correction." He released the button and gave Luis a curt nod. "Spray and close." Luis triggered dye spray. Nozzles swept in, an atomized release agent across both halves, a white fan against dark steel. At normal temp, that mist flashed off quickly and left a uniform matte sheen. Tonight, the ejector lower quadrant stayed glossy too long. Moisture clung in a crescent near the channel plugs, then ran in tiny threads toward the vent gutter. Kelly could see it even from the aisle. She pointed, though she knew Brent would pretend not to see. "Lower ejector quadrant is staying wet," she said. Brent said, "It's fine." "It's not evaporating at target rate." "It's fine." The clamp began to close. Massive platens traveled toward each other with the slow confidence only heavy machinery had. On the trend screen, clamp tonnage rose, dipped, then rose again in a wobble that should not exist on a clean seat. Kelly had explained this to trainees dozens of times. A healthy close looked like a smooth ramp. A stepped ramp meant mismatch, contamination, or distortion. The machine recorded a yellow advisory, then because override was armed, advanced anyway. Janelle whispered mostly to herself, "Tonnage curve is ugly." Brent heard her and answered in the same low register, "We need one part." Kelly caught that sentence and stored it. Managers always said one part when they were already committed to many. Clamp locked. Shot system charged. Plunger position reset to home. The shot sleeve heater read nominal, but pressure prefill oscillated by 3 bar around baseline. Another small wrongness stacking onto the others. Industrial failures rarely arrived as one giant warning. They arrived as a pile of minor warnings that somebody had to respect. Kelly opened the digital shift report and entered a formal refusal addendum while events were still live. Active interlock override observed at 251. Unresolved dithermal differential approximately 43 degrees Celsius. Visible moisture near C4 return. Ejector thermocouple T3 unstable. Clamp tonnage trace non-uniform at close. Advised independent pyrometer verification and dry clamp check. Not performed. She submitted it to the timestamp server and forwarded a copy to her Union Steward mailbox and plant safety archive. External contact logged. Outcome pending. Brent heard the notification ping from the shared system and glared across the aisle. "Are you writing essays or finding another assignment?" "I'm documenting mechanism." "You're documenting excuses." "I'm documenting your decision path." His mouth tightened, but he looked away because the machine was ready and optics had shifted. Even with override, cycle start still required a human finger. He gave Luis another nod. "Run it." Luis hesitated a fraction, then pressed start. The shot cylinder advanced with a deep, hydraulic shove. Not the violent phase yet, just approach and metal feed. Kelly listened for harmonics in the machine frame and heard a low, uneven growl under the normal pump tone. She had heard that note before on another line years ago, the night an insert cracked after chronic thermal shock. She moved 2 steps farther back from the yellow line and touched the emergency stop post with one gloved hand, not to interfere, just to know exactly where it was if someone froze. The first injection completed without a blast, but the ejection stroke told its own story. Pins pushed. The casting hung for half a second, then tore free asymmetrically, one lug missing and flash feathered along the lower edge like a jagged silver leaf. Steam ghosted from the vent seam, thin and fast, then vanished in the overhead draft. Luis held the part up involuntarily, staring at the torn geometry. Kelly did not raise her voice. "That is thermal mismatch with moisture disturbance," she said. "You just printed the warning into metal." Brent answered instantly, too instantly. "It's startup scrap. Run again." Janelle looked from the part to the floor seepage and back to the screen, where T3 continued its erratic sawtooth. "We should stop and reheat balance," she said, "and pressure test C4. Brent gave her a hard stare. "You are here to execute, not redesign the night." Kelly watched Luis set the torn part into the scrap chute with shaking care, as if gentleness could change what it meant. The red stack light was still pulsing above all of them, ignored but not gone. A metronome marking each choice. technical alarm was no longer a theory on a console. It was visible in moisture that would not evaporate, in a sensor that would not stabilize, in a tonnage curve that would not smooth, in a casting that came out damaged on the very first overridden shot. The machine had testified in 4 languages at once. Brent heard none of them. Kelly stepped closer to the boundary again, not crossing it, and pointed at the scrap chute where the torn housing still rocked against other rejects. "That is not startup scrap," she said. "That is a process signature. Lower lug tear, vent side flash, and drag marks at ejection. You are seeing uneven solidification and trapped vapor." Brent did not even look at the part. He kept his eyes on Luis and tapped the cycle icon with one finger on the screen. "Run again." Luis hovered over the panel, shoulders tight, and asked the one question that could still slow the night. "Do we want to tag this first shot to quality review?" "We want output," Brent said. "Tag it startup variation and keep moving." Kelly could hear her own pulse in the brief silence that followed. The machine idled with a low hydraulic hum, waiting for a command that would either stay inside steel or tear through it. She forced her voice back into the steady cadence she used during audits. "If you run again without drying and balancing that die, you are stacking pressure on a wet pocket. The first part already told you the cavity is unstable." Brent turned to her with open irritation. "You're off this station. Stop calling plays." "I'm calling failure modes," she said. "There is a difference." He took 2 steps toward the aisle until he stood just outside the yellow line, almost toe-to-toe with her. "No. The difference is authority. I run this shift." She met his stare without backing up. Authority does not change phase change. Water flashes to steam. Steam expands. Expansion spikes local pressure. Then the weakest interface fails first, and we both know that seam is on ejector side tonight. From the platform, Janelle said quietly. C4 return just dropped another 2 liters per minute. Brent snapped his head toward her. "Sensor noise." Janelle held her ground. "It's not noise. Flow is trending down while pump command is flat. That's either blockage or leak path." Kelly kept her eyes on Brent. "And if it's blockage, trapped water sits until injection heat finds it. That gives you hydro-lock in a cavity section that wasn't designed for compressible gas at that rate. You crack an insert, you score the shot sleeve, and you can lose guarding integrity in 1 cycle." He gave a humorless smile. "You rehearsed this speech?" "I lived this speech," she said. 14 years of near misses turned into procedures so people go home with their faces intact." Luis lowered his hand from the panel. "Brent, maybe we pause and run the handheld temp check. It takes 2 minutes. Brent rounded on him instantly. "You taking orders from the aisle now?" "No, sir, just asking." "Then stop asking and start producing." Kelly felt the shift inside the scene. Fear moving from private to visible. Luis was not arguing policy. He was trying to survive probation and the night at the same time. She chose her next words with surgical precision. "For the record, with moisture present, a second shot requires signed process deviation authorization by management before cycle command." Brent's jaw set hard. "Kelly, one more instruction to my operator and you are out of this building." She did not raise her volume. "Then log this first. Cell 7 produced a torn casting under override with unresolved thermal split and confirmed cooling anomaly. That is a mandatory hold point under the control plan." He stepped to the console, hit the comms key, and barked into his headset. Quality desk, Halverson on 7. Startup variation only. No hold. Repeat, no hold. A crackle came back through static. Copy 7, startup variation, the voice said, uncertain and quick, then cut out. Kelly pulled her tablet up and dictated as she recorded the live screen. 2:54 and 32 seconds. Manager verbally classifies defect as startup variation despite thermal and moisture indicators. Audio captured. She panned to the torn part, then the C4 damp crescent on the floor grating, then the trend line where T3 still zigzagged. Evidence, then timestamp, then mechanism. Brent heard her narration and flared. "Put that away." "No," I said, "put it away. I am documenting an active, unsafe directive." He took a half step as if to grab the tablet, then stopped himself when Janelle looked up from the cabinet. He pivoted to command tone, louder now, so nearby workers could hear and absorb the hierarchy. "Kelly Sullivan, you are interfering with production after being relieved. Final warning?" She answered at normal volume, and that calm carried farther than a shout. "I am standing outside the boundary line. I am not touching controls. I am stating a technical stop condition. Wet dye plus override equals high energy failure risk." He threw one hand up. "There is no wet dye." She pointed to the lower ejector quadrant where moisture still glistened in the work lights. "Then explain why that surface is still reflective 20 seconds after spray cutoff at this temperature." He did not answer. "Explain the tonnage wobble on close." No answer. "Explain T3 drift without matching spray pulse." Still no answer. Kelly let one beat pass, then delivered the sentence the floor would remember long after management emails were deleted. "You can overrule me. You cannot overrule the mechanism." For a second, Brent looked almost ready to stand down. Then his radio chirped with dock traffic again, and whatever doubt had surfaced disappeared under schedule panic. He thumbed transmit. "Shipping. 7 is cycling. We'll recover count." He clipped the radio back, turned to Luis, and chopped a hand toward the panel. "Run shot 2. Luis stayed frozen, eyes flicking between Kelly and the HMI. "I need a sign-off if we bypass hold point," he said, voice thin but audible. Brent laughed once, sharp. "You need a paycheck. Hit start." Kelly looked at Luis, then at the fault banner still red above amber override text, then back to Brent. "You want explicit mechanism on record? Fine. If trapped moisture reaches molten front during intensification, local pressure jumps faster than venting can relieve. That can fracture the insert at the thinnest thermal gradient, eject tool fragments, and atomize coolant if a line gets cut. You are not risking a dent. You are risking fragmentation." A nearby forklift slowed to a crawl, driver watching through the mast. Brent spread his hands like she had proven his point. "Listen to this. Catastrophe monologue every time. This is not theater. This is insubordination with extra adjectives." Kelly took a breath through the smell of hot oil and dye lube and kept going, because stopping now would let him frame silence as retreat. "Then write the order exactly. Bypass maintained, thermal imbalance acknowledged, moisture indicator ignored, second shot commanded. Put your name on it." He stepped in until his vest nearly touched her jacket. "You don't assign paperwork to management." "I assign causality," she said. "The report can decide the rest." The pause that followed was broken by a rising pump note as the machine auto-pre-charged, still waiting for cycle command. Every person within 20 meters could feel the standoff as a physical thing now, pressure without movement. On the wall clock, the minute hand clicked toward 2:56 a.m. Brent lifted his radio and spoke with clipped precision. Security to Base C, Cell 7 aisle. Non-compliant employee refusing removal. Luis stared at him. Security? She's outside the line. Brent did not look at him. Run your station. Kelly felt a cold line pass under the anger. This was the play she had predicted the moment he insulted her in front of the crew. Redefine technical refusal as behavioral disruption, then remove the witness? She shifted her tablet camera to include Brent's face and radio in frame. Security request logged, she said quietly. Cause stated as non-compliance while employee remains outside hazard boundary. He jabbed a finger toward her tablet. You are done recording internal operations. Then issue the legal hold notice, she said. Until then, this is contemporaneous documentation. Janelle exhaled hard and muttered, This is getting bad. Kelly heard her and replied without turning. It was bad when the key turned. Brent pointed at Luis again, harder this time. Cycle now. Luis swallowed, then spoke to the panel almost to himself. Shot count 2. His finger trembled over the start key, then stopped again. I need someone else to acknowledge this. You have acknowledgement, Brent snapped. Mine. Not verbal, Luis said. System acknowledgement. Brent thrust his own badge at him. Use mine. Kelly stepped sideways so her body was fully clear of the station sight line and said, For the record, if this proceeds under your badge, the action trail reflects managerial command. Brent rounded on her. Enough. She kept her voice low and even. Truth is enough. 2 security officers appeared at the end of the aisle in navy uniforms and hard hats, moving fast but uncertain, because they were used to escorting visitors, not operators. Brent waved them over without taking his eyes off Kelly. Escort her off production floor. Badge already suspended. One officer, an older man Kelly recognized from fire drills, stopped within arm's length and spoke carefully. Kelly, we were called for refusal to clear area. Kelly held up both hands, tablet in left, empty right. I am clear of controlled area and not obstructing access. I am documenting a safety objection. The officer glanced at Brent, then at the red stack light, then back to Kelly. I need you to come with us to HR office. Brent cut in. Immediately. Kelly nodded once. I will walk, but before I do, I need one sentence on camera from management. He is ordering continued operation under interlock override, despite documented moisture and thermal imbalance. Brent barked a disbelieving laugh. You don't get deposition rights on the floor. She angled the tablet so his face and the fault banner were both visible. Then decline on record. He slapped his own badge against the panel reader, grabbed the pendant dead man with his other hand, and leaned toward Luis. Move, I'll run it. Luis stepped back from the controls as if the steel deck had shifted under him. Janelle looked from Brent to Kelly, then said, barely above machine noise, I object to this sequence. Brent shot her a glare that could have cut sheet metal. Noted. Stay at your terminal. Kelly took one step backward with the security officers flanking her, eyes locked on the platform. Brent's shoulders were rigid, movements clipped. The posture of a man trying to outrun numbers with force. He keyed spray manually, then clamped close. Bypass text, glowing amber beneath a red fault. The nozzles swept. The lower quadrant stayed wet again, plainly visible. He ignored it. The older security officer murmured, Kelly, please. She let them guide her 3 paces down the aisle, then stopped long enough to raise her voice once, clear and unshaken. "Brent, last warning. If you inject on that condition, you are gambling with fragment energy, not scrap rate." He did not turn around. "Get her off my floor." The officers resumed walking her toward the caged stair that led to the admin corridor. Kelly moved with them, but she kept her head turned until the platform angle blocked her view. She could still hear Cell 7 through the aisle noise. Clamp lock thud, accumulator charge whine. The machine building toward commanded force under a logic path she had refused to bless. At the base of the stairs, she stopped again and typed one final line into the shift report addendum before signal dropped in the concrete corridor. 25748, removed from bay by security after formal warning issued. Manager personally assumed controls under override. Witness list includes maintenance and security. She hit submit, watched the server confirmation stamp appear, and only then let the officers lead her through the door as the sound of the machine followed them like a distant storm. The corridor door thudded shut behind her, and Cell 7 dropped from full-volume metal thunder to a muffled, body-deep vibration that still carried through concrete and cinder block. Kelly walked between the two security officers under buzzing fluorescent strips, boots striking the epoxy floor in a rhythm that matched the machine's cycle timing in her head. Spray, close, charge, inject, open, eject. She hated that she could still time it without looking. The older officer kept his tone formal but not hostile. "HR wants you in Conference C," he said. "Let this go until morning." Kelly turned her head just enough to keep him in view and answered without slowing. "If he runs another shot under that override, morning might start with an ambulance report. I need one radio call to stop the cell." The younger officer reached for his shoulder mic, looked at the older one, then hesitated. They were security, not operations. In most nights, that boundary made sense. Tonight, it felt like a hole in the safety net. From the stair landing window, she could see a slice of Bay C through wired glass, just enough to catch the red pulse from the stack light reflecting off a crane rail. She stopped on the landing and listened. Clamp close carried as a low impact through steel columns. 2 seconds later came accumulator whine, then injection. A hard hydraulic shove with a rough edge at the end that told her pressure had spiked and dropped instead of tapering clean. She did the count under her breath anyway, hands tight at her sides. 15 to spray, 20 to close, 40 to inject. That's too fast for correction checks. The older officer finally keyed his radio. Bay C lead, security. Confirm status at Cell 7. Static answered first. Then a voice Kelly recognized from logistics came back thin and distracted. 7 is running. Manager on controls. Kelly leaned toward the mic and kept her words sharp and technical. Tell them to pause for C4 pressure test and manual pyrometer check. Active moisture hazard. The logistics voice stalled. I'm not authorized to call that. Then silence again. External contact made. Outcome immediate and useless. They reached the admin corridor where glass-fronted offices looked down toward the floor. Conference C stood open, fluorescent white, empty, except for a rolling chair and a policy poster about respectful workplace conduct. Kelly did not enter. She moved to the overlook pane at the end of the hall, pressed one glove against the cool glass, and searched for motion around Cell 7. The angle showed only partial lines. Top of the guarding ladder cage, the edge of the platform. She could not see Brent's face, but she could see the rhythm of bad decisions. Spray plume rose and drifted. Clamp closed. A beat later, a pale puff ghosted from the lower vent seam and vanished. Steam, not lubricant mist. She pointed it out to the older officer. There, lower ejector vent. That vapor pulse shouldn't exist after close. He squinted, uncertain. She gave him the plain language version. Water is getting where only heat should be. If it flashes under confinement, pressure finds a way out. At 3:02 a.m., the plant PA clicked and announced routine dock movement in another bay, absurdly normal over the throb of a cell that was writing an incident report in real time. Kelly pulled up the shared production dashboard on her tablet through guest Wi-Fi and filtered to Cell 7 telemetry snapshots, the limited set visible outside operations login. Cycle counter had advanced. Scrap flag on first two parts read Startup VAR, no hold. Shot peak for cycle 2 sat 12% above baseline with a pressure hump midway through intensification, exactly where trapped vapor disturbed metal front velocity. She turned the screen to the officers. This is not clean startup. This is unstable fill and pressure interference. The younger officer finally spoke, low and uneasy. Can you call your union person? Kelly shook her head once. I already logged refusal and sent archive copy. Union can fight payroll tomorrow. This is kinetic risk now. Another cycle thudded through the building. The vibration arrived in 2 pulses instead of 1. Kelly felt the second one through the ball of her foot and swore softly, not at anyone, at the pattern. She moved toward the stair door again. I'm going back to visual range. I will stay outside boundary. The older officer blocked the frame with his forearm. We were told to keep you off production. She met his eyes. Then come with me and keep me off the line. But if that guarding fails, evacuation timing matters in seconds, not policy chains. He held the look for a long moment, then dropped his arm and nodded to his partner. We escort, no contact with controls. They descended together into the bay return corridor, the smell of hot oil and dye lube strengthening with every step. When the door to bay C opened, noise hit like physical weather. Clamp hydraulics, conveyor motors, fork horns, radios, alarms muted and unmuted in different zones. Kelly moved to the aisle stripe opposite Cell 7 and stopped exactly where she had stood earlier by the scrap hopper. Security stayed 1 pace behind her shoulders, forming a reluctant perimeter. Janelle was still at the maintenance cart, laptop open, face drawn tight. Luis stood near the platform rail, not on the controls now, arms folded against his chest as if holding himself in place. Brent remained at the pendant with his badge still active, body angled toward the HMI like the machine belonged to force of will. Kelly called across the noise. Brent, C4 is venting steam. Stop and pressure test. He did not look over. You were removed. Stay removed. She answered in the same cadence she had used all night. I am outside the boundary. You have unstable intensification and live moisture. Stop. He jabbed the next command and spoke to no one in particular. Shot 3. We ship tonight. Janelle looked at Kelly, then at Brent. Peak pressure is climbing each cycle, she said, louder this time, choosing recordable words. We're at 147 megapascals equivalent and trending up. Brent snapped back, sensor scatter. Janelle pointed at her screen. Scatter doesn't repeat at the same fill position. Luis found his voice and added, ejection drag is worse. Part 2 stuck longer. Brent cut him off. Then increase ejector stroke and quit narrating. Kelly stepped half a shoe length forward to the edge of the painted aisle and stopped. You're treating symptoms and feeding the cause. Brent finally glanced at her, eyes flat and bright with fatigue and anger. No, I'm doing what managers do when operators panic. I keep production moving. By 3:10 a.m., a quality coordinator in a yellow vest reached the aisle with a handheld scanner and a tablet, breathless from hurrying. She scanned 2 totes, checked the screen, and frowned. Portal just switched us to conditional on this part, family, she said to Brent. Customer wants containment notice before sunrise. Delayed consequence, immediate cash burn, no explosion required. Brent did not even turn fully toward her. Send them containment template and keep lines running. She looked past him to the red fault banner still lit on the HMI and then to Kelly by the aisle stripe, understanding enough to go pale. Is that interlock still bypassed? Brent's answer came clipped. It's managed. Kelly answered at the same moment. It's overridden. The coordinator backed away with her tablet against her chest and keyed a call as she walked, voice shaking but clear. Quality Manager Bay C now. Cell 7 sprayed again. Mist washed over the die faces and the lower ejector quadrant gleamed wet long after the upper half turned matte. Kelly pointed and did not bother modulating tone anymore. Look at the evaporation mismatch. Janelle stared at it too and said, that area should be dry in 6 seconds at current set point. Brent hit clamp close. The platens came together with a heavy misaligned final thunk that made the guarding rattle. Tonnage trace on Janelle's screen formed a stepped rise, then a notch, then recovery. She said, seat is uneven. Brent said, seat is closed. Kelly felt dread settle from emotion into certainty, a grim mechanical certainty she had learned to trust more than hope. When systems gave multiple independent warnings that lined up, the outcome was no longer speculative. It was cued. He initiated injection. The machine roared through phase 1 fill, then gave a sharp metallic bark she had never heard from this cell at normal operation, like a hammer strike inside a box of bolts. Several heads turned across the bay. 7 seconds into the shot, a white jet flashed from the lower vent seam and cut sideways through the guard mesh, thin and violent, instantly condensing in the cooler air. Steam breach, Kelly shouted. E-stop and evacuate Bay C. Brent reached toward the pendant, but he reached late, still processing denial into action. At 9 seconds, a cracking report rang out from inside the die, not loud like an explosion yet, but deep, structural, the sound of hardened steel losing argument with pressure. Janelle slapped the alarm key on the maintenance panel. Red strobes went full and the bay horn switched from periodic tone to continuous. At 12 seconds, the failure crossed from contained to open. The ejector side insert split and shifted under load. Molten aluminum and fragments punched through compromised guarding in a fan of bright streaks and dark metal arcs. One fragment struck a coolant manifold, shearing a line. Pressurized coolant atomized into a white cloud as it hit hot surfaces. Another fragment hit a hydraulic return fitting. Oil mist flashed in the same instant the steam cloud rolled, producing a brief orange-white fireball that ballooned outward and collapsed almost immediately against overhead draft. Heat hit Kelly's face from 20 feet away like an oven door opened into winter. The blast wave was short but hard enough to rattle windows in the admin corridor and throw loose paperwork off a nearby desk. People moved all at once, then froze, then moved again in chaotic vectors. Luis stumbled backward from the rail, clutching his shoulder, hard hat askew, cheek marked by a narrow cut where a small fragment had glanced off. He stayed on his feet but bent forward, stunned. A forklift operator near aisle cross traffic swerved to avoid two running packers, clipped a pallet corner, and went down with the cab door open, wrist trapped awkwardly against the steering column. Brent dropped the pendant and ducked behind the platform post, coughing in coolant fog and smoke, face drained of color. Janelle was already moving opposite direction to the emergency isolation panel, hitting coolant shutoff and then hydraulic pump stop in sequence, each switch requiring a deliberate pull and twist. Kelly grabbed the wall pull station and yanked. Full plant evacuation tones layered over the bay horn, unmistakable and final. "Head count point Alpha," she shouted, voice hoarse in the chemical heat. Security echoed the command down the aisle, now fully in incident mode instead of escort mode. Kelly moved toward Luis but stopped at the boundary where radiant heat from the damaged guard still shimmered. "Can you walk?" she yelled. He nodded once, jaw clenched, hand pressed to his shoulder. "Then move with me now." She guided him by the uninjured arm along the aisle stripe away from cell 7 while coolant fog drifted low across the floor and emergency lights strobed off wet concrete. Behind them, Brent staggered out from cover, coughing, trying to speak into his radio between breaths. No one answered him first. Dispatch answered the alarm system first. At the cross aisle, she handed Luis to the younger security officer and pivoted toward the forklift operator, who was conscious and breathing but grimacing, wrist already swelling. Two material handlers stabilized the forklift mast and helped her ease him clear. Without twisting the arm, he kept saying, "I'm okay, I'm okay," with the fixed tone people used when they were not okay but still functional. Kelly checked for immediate hazards, saw none within reach, then waved them toward evacuation route B as smoke extraction fans spooled up overhead. The bay transformed from production geometry to emergency geometry in under a minute. Arrows, muster points, accountability boards, radios clipped to vests with voices gone clipped, and procedural. From the far side of the bay, she looked back once at cell 7 through thinning fog. Guard panels were bent outward. One tie bar area was streaked with aluminum spray that had frozen into dull, jagged ribbons against steel. The red stack light still pulsed through alarm haze, absurdly consistent, as if the machine were repeating the same sentence it had started an hour earlier, and no one with authority had wanted to hear. Kelly did not feel triumph. She felt the cold, exhausted anger of seeing a preventable chain run to completion, exactly as predicted. Physics had filed its grievance in fire, steam, and broken hardware. Management hierarchy had no reply. Kelly stayed at muster point Alpha until the last badge was checked and the last name answered. The accountability board sat on a folding table under sodium lights, and every supervisor had to sign beside head count totals with a grease pencil that kept snapping from cold fingers and adrenaline. Bay C came in 2 short at first, then 1, then complete, when the younger security officer walked Luis in with his arm held close and his face pale beneath coolant streaks. He was upright, speaking in full sentences, and that alone steadied something in Kelly's chest. The forklift operator arrived on a rolling chair pushed by 2 handlers, jaw clenched around pain, wrist braced with a cardboard splint and tape from the trauma kit. No one cheered. They simply exhaled and wrote numbers that meant everyone had made it out alive. The incident commander took over in orange vest and face shield, voice clipped to procedure. Cell 7 isolated, main hydraulic off, Coolant feed to bay header closed. Fire suppression discharged local only. No propagation to adjacent cells. He looked directly at Kelly, then at Brent, then back to the checklist. Witness statements start now. No one leaves property until released. Brent opened his mouth to contest sequence, but the commander did not slow. Manager comments go through the same form as everyone else tonight. Kelly gave first aid gloves to the medic team when they arrived, then stepped back and watched Luis get assessed under portable floodlights. A paramedic cleaned the cut on his cheek, checked eye response, palpated shoulder range, and recommended transport for imaging, because fragment strikes could hide deeper damage than they showed. Luis looked toward Cell 7 through the chain link gap and asked, "Did it fully blow?" Kelly answered the way she answered process questions on training days. Plain words, no ornament. Insert failed. Guarding breached. You're lucky your stance was back from the rail. He nodded once, then flinched as the medic stabilized his arm. Brent tried to step into that exchange and reclaim authority. He followed my instruction. Startup anomaly escalated unexpectedly. Kelly turned to him with coolant drying stiff on her sleeves. It escalated exactly as warned. The incident commander lifted a hand between them. Not here. Put it in writing. That was the first moment the night shifted from shouting to record, and Kelly trusted records more than voices. By 3:44 a.m., operations had converted Bay C into a controlled scene. Red lockout hasps hung on every energy isolation point at Cell 7. Security taped a hard perimeter from column C12 to C19. Maintenance posted a do not enter board listing hazards, residual heat, pressure pockets, sharp fragmented tooling, contaminated runoff. Kelly watched Janelle hand over the maintenance laptop to IT custody with a chain of control tag zip-tied through the handle. Janelle caught Kelly's eye and said quietly, "I exported trend logs to read only at 3:31. Mirror copy to server hash verified." Kelly answered with the same quiet precision. "Good. Keep your notebook pages. Originals matter." The quality coordinator who had run in earlier came back with a different face now, all urgency stripped to bureaucratic shock. Portal status moved from conditional to containment required, she told the incident commander, holding her tablet like it might burn her. Customer blocked ASN release on this part number. They want serial trace for last 5 days, pressure curves, and deviation approvals by 9 a.m. Brent said, "Tell them we had a localized event. Unaffected lots can ship." She didn't look at him. They already froze receiving. No trucks unload until they see evidence. Delayed consequence had become immediate cash restriction, and everyone in earshot understood the translation. Inventory would sit, invoices would stall, and payroll would keep running anyway. Kelly gave her formal statement in the EHS office at 4:02 a.m., seated under a camera with timestamp overlay. She read directly from her submitted refusal log and added sequence details minute by minute. Override armed at 2:51, first torn casting, requested hold point, security removal, return to aisle under escort, steam jet at 7 seconds into shot 3, structural crack at 9, breach at 12. She handed over her tablet and specified each file name, each capture angle, each witness visible in frame. EHS printed a receipt with device serial, transfer time, and signature lines. Kelly signed once, then asked for a copy. The clerk slid one across without comment. Physical evidence collected and stored, not narrated from memory. 2 rooms down, she could hear Brent through a closed door saying, nuisance fault and operator resistance. The words sounded smaller now, trapped in drywall and policy templates. When he exited, his sleeves were streaked with black from smoke, and his tie was gone. He saw Kelly holding the evidence receipt and gave a tired, brittle laugh. "You got your paperwork," she answered. "You got your mechanism." He started to reply, then stopped when the plant manager entered the hall. Dana Mercer had been home 30 minutes away when the alarm call hit. She arrived in steel-toe boots over office slacks, hair pinned back. No theatrics. She went straight to Bay C overlook, studied the bent guarding and frozen spray on tie bar steel, then called emergency conference in the training room at 4:35 a.m. Kelly sat along the side wall with Janelle, Union Steward Mark Ellis, Quality Lead Priya Nandakumar, EHS, Maintenance and Finance on speaker. Brent sat at the table head he usually occupied on night shift. Dana took that seat without asking. "Facts first," Dana said. "Not opinions, not reputations." She pointed to the screen where trend logs now ran on replay. Tonnage wobble at close. T3 sawtooth drift. Pressure hump intensifying each cycle. Override status active. "Was Interlock bypassed intentionally?" she asked. Janelle answered, "Yes." "Maintenance access, manager directive?" Dana asked. "Was there a documented objection?" EHS answered, "Yes." Kelly submitted refusal and mechanism notes at 2:51 and 2:57 with server timestamps. Dana asked one more question. "Did anyone order a stop after first defective casting?" Silence held for 2 beats. Then Luis's supervisor, joining by phone from the clinic, said, "No documented stop order." Finance joined with preliminary numbers at 5:10 a.m., and the room chilled in a different way. Direct equipment damage currently estimated at $3.8 million, the analyst said. That includes die set destruction, guarding replacement, hydraulic manifold rebuild, coolant line network, and likely platen/tie bar alignment correction beyond in-house capacity. Maintenance added, "Vendor field team says 8-week outage minimum for full geometry recertification, assuming parts lead times hold." The analyst continued. "Scrap and rework exposure currently 640,000, subject to quarantine expansion." Priya cut in. "Quarantine already includes 1,240 housings due to porosity signatures and traceability risk. No release until CT sampling and pressure test disposition." Every number landed like a hammer tap on a ledger that had no sympathy for intent. Dana moved to legal notifications. Hospital transfer occurred. That triggers mandatory regulator call window. EHS confirmed. Serious injury report prepared. Lockout/interlock bypass and training records packaged. Scene photos indexed. Witness roster attached. The insurer hotline had already issued a claim number, but their adjuster's email arrived while the meeting ran and was read aloud by legal counsel on speaker. Coverage review would include potential willful safeguard override exclusions pending investigation. Mark, the union steward, leaned back and said what everyone heard in that sentence: partial denial risk. Finance answered, "If denial stands on override finding, uninsured loss escalates fast." At 5:42 a.m., Kelly got the first external callback that mattered. Her union submission from earlier had reached Regional Safety Council, and the council requested her raw files plus server metadata copies. Outcome logged. They would intervene on disciplinary actions and whistleblower protection if retaliation appeared. She forwarded the receipt number and EHS custody form from her phone while seated in the same room as management. No secrecy required. Dana watched that exchange and said, "No adverse action on refusal pending investigation. Put that in writing by shift change." HR typed it into meeting minutes immediately. 3 days later, after continuous scene work and tear down under regulator observation, the mechanical report confirmed what Kelly had said in under 30 seconds on the floor. Ejector side cooling channel C4 showed microfracture leakage and mineral blockage. Moisture had persisted in a low-flow pocket near the vent side insert. Thermal differential exceeded control plan limits by more than 40 degrees Celsius at override time. The insert crack initiated along the thinnest section adjacent to that gradient, then propagated under intensified pressure. Guard breach points matched fragment trajectories captured on security camera. Causality chain closed with no missing link. Bypass removed the last automated stop between known instability and high-energy injection. The legal and financial consequences kept unfolding without flames, exactly the kind that sank quarters instead of nights. By the second week of October, Ironclad's insurer had issued a reservation of rights letter, citing potential denial for losses tied to intentional interlock defeat. The customer portal hold converted to contractual holdback, freezing payment on shipped inventory until containment audits cleared. Expedite freight charges climbed because unaffected programs had to reroute around Bay C capacity loss. Overtime costs rose in machining and assembly to cover part shortages. None of it exploded. It simply drained cash day after day. Luis was discharged with shoulder treatment, stitched cheek, and a specialist referral for scar management. He filed workers' compensation with no dispute on medical coverage, then a separate claim for permanent facial scarring that legal marked as likely settlement exposure. The forklift operator's wrist fracture was classified recordable with restricted duty projection at 6 weeks. Kelly visited neither man in hospital corridors with speeches. She sent process notes and witness contact details through the proper channels, because practical help traveled farther than sentiment in an industrial incident. Regulators arrived in dark jackets and took the bay apart in questions. Training matrix for probationary operators, authority limits on maintenance override keys, alarm classification governance, change control signatures for nuisance fault coding. Kelly answered each item in the same clipped style she used at her station. What the rule said, what happened, what evidence supported it. She did not embellish Brent's tone, and she did not soften his actions. EHS handed over her refusal log as an Exhibit 14 in the internal packet, with server hash verification attached. Her single sentence from earlier became a line in the official chronology. Refused unsafe operation citing hydrolock and fragmentation risk. At quarter review, the totals were no longer preliminary. Direct equipment loss held at $3.8 million. Scrap and rework settled near $640,000. Bay C outage consumed 8 weeks of planned output. 2 contracts rolled off renewal, carrying an annualized revenue hit of $11.2 million once forecasts updated. OSHA citations arrived for interlock bypass control failure and training deficiencies, with corrective action deadlines that rewrote half the plant's authorization matrix. Insurance paid portions tied to collateral damage and injury response, then denied substantial equipment and business interruption segments under willful override clauses. The spreadsheet did what the blast had started. It made denial measurable. On the night all this began, Kelly had stood under a red stack light and warned that one shortcut could turn a machine into a cannon. In the reckoning that followed, no one needed metaphors. The logs, invoices, claims, citations, and medical files formed their own language, and every line said the same thing. Schedule pressure had asked for one clean run, and reality sent back an 8-week shutdown with interest. At 6:18 a.m., while dawn flattened the parking lot into pale gray, Dana Mercer called one more meeting in the training room and shut the door before anyone could drift into side conversations. The room smelled like burnt coffee, wet jackets, and the faint chemical trace that had followed Bay C personnel all night. Brent sat at the end of the table with a borrowed hard hat in his lap and a legal pad he had not written on. Kelly took a chair against the wall beside Mark Ellis and kept her evidence receipt folder on her knees. Dana placed 3 printed packets on the table one by one. The Interlock override log, EHS witness chronology, and the still frame showing Brent's badge ID active at cycle command. "This is not a debate about style," Dana said. "This is a fact set about control of hazardous energy." She turned to Brent. "Did you command injection after a documented stop objection?" Brent's eyes moved to the photo, then to Kelly, then back to Dana. "I commanded restart after what I believed was a nuisance class fault." Dana did not blink. "Belief is not a control method. Procedure is." She slid a 4th paper across the table, already signed by HR. "Effective immediately, you are removed from supervisory duty pending termination for gross safety misconduct." Brent read the top line, jaw tight, then gave a dry laugh with no humor in it. "You're hanging this on one bad cycle." Kelly spoke before Dana had to. "It was 3 cycles under override. 1 torn casting, 1 steam breach, 1 guard failure, and 12 seconds of preventable escalation." Brent looked at her, and for the first time since the aisle confrontation, his voice dropped below performance volume. "You wanted this." Kelly held his gaze. "I wanted the stop button pressed when the mechanism showed up." 2 days later, in Conference B, with Labor Council on speaker, the reinstatement scene unfolded with the same cold paperwork rhythm as the suspension had. HR manager Celia Ortiz placed Kelly's operator card on the table, magnetic strip facing up, next to a back pay calculation sheet. "Suspension is rescinded," Celia said. "Status active, no discipline attached to refusal." Mark nudged the sheet toward Kelly and tapped the line item. 41 hours plus differential. Kelly signed once for receipt, once for payroll, once for access restoration. Celia added, "Your refusal log is now part of formal training material for stop work authority." Kelly exhaled through her nose. Not relief exactly. More like pressure, settling after a long hold. "Put the mechanism language in it," she said. "Not just speak up. People need to know why." Celia nodded. "Hydrolock, thermal imbalance, vent loading, and override prohibition are in the revision." External contact resolved. Union grievance closed as substantiated safety refusal. No arbitration needed. By the first Monday of November, regulators sat in Bay C in folding chairs, facing a projector screen, while EHS walked through preserved evidence chain. Kelly attended in steel toe boots and a clean face shield, answering only when asked. The EHS analyst to click through hashes and custody forms, like reading serial numbers off critical parts. Item A, Kelly Sullivan tablet forensic image, SHA 256 verified against intake copy, no edits after 3:33. Item B, maintenance laptop export set from Janelle Ruiz, read-only mirror confirmed. Item C, frayed jib sling photo series, timestamp 250 to 252, plus physical sling recovered from rigging rack with out-of-service tag intact. One inspector held up the sling in a clear evidence bag, bright fibers visible where the braid had opened. "Who removed this from service?" he asked. Kelly raised 2 fingers. "I tagged it before shot 2. The inspector wrote for a long moment, then asked Maintenance Superintendent Cole Avery, "Was replacement issued?" Cole answered, "Yes. New sling logged at 7/12 same date. Old sling quarantined. Distinctive detail resolved in record. Not causative for cell 7, but corroborative for degraded safety culture in the same bay." The inspector closed that section with a single line. "Pattern of normalization documented." Luis gave his statement that afternoon in the clinic conference room, with his shoulder taped and a narrow healing line on his cheek. Kelly sat across from him only because legal requested confrontation chronology from both sides in one pass. He kept his hands clasped while he spoke. "I hesitated on shot 2 because I saw moisture stay glossy on lower ejector side and because Kelly had trained us on evaporation mismatch." He looked briefly at Kelly, then at the recorder. "I asked for handheld verification and system sign-off. Manager said run." Counsel asked, "Did Kelly direct you to violate hierarchy?" Luis shook his head. "No, she told me mechanism and hold point. She stayed outside the line." Loaded look paid off. The silent acknowledgement from the first confrontation had been understanding, not indecision. Before they ended, he added one sentence, without prompting. "When she yelled steam breach, that warning gave me the half-second to step back." "Nobody in the room?" challenged it. Janelle's turn came next, and she resolved her own half-finished silence from the night on record. "I paused at the cabinet when Kelly first asked for C4 flow because I was under direct manager instruction set and I knew refusal could trigger a write-up," she said. "I should have escalated sooner." The regulator asked, "Did you object before shot 3? Janelle answered, "Yes," verbally. "Peak pressure is climbing each cycle." That's in the Bay audio. Then she leaned forward and tapped the trend printout with her pen. T3 sawtooth drift, tonnage notch at close, and pressure hump repeating at fill position. 3 independent indicators. That is not noise. The inspector nodded once. "Your data supports causality." She sat back, shoulders dropping for the first time. The loaded glance she had exchanged with Kelly at the cabinet finally had language attached. She had seen the same thing and said it, late but clearly. Security testimony closed another dangling thread. Officer Raymond Pike, the older guard from the stairwell, spoke in plain terms that were hard to spin. "I escorted Ms. Sullivan as directed. She remained outside controlled boundary when I observed her. She requested operations stop by hazard description, not by physical interference." Corporate counsel tried one angle. "Did she escalate conflict?" Pike answered, "She escalated warning content. Different thing." The room went quiet at that distinction. The younger officer corroborated radio traffic timestamps and added that Kelly had assisted evacuation and first response after the breach. External contact resolved. The security call used to remove her became evidence supporting her compliance. At quarter-end governance review, the legal consequence arrived without sirens. Company counsel read from a letter on county letterhead, while the executive team and supervisors sat around a long table under cold, recessed lights. State has filed reckless endangerment charges against former Supervisor Brent Halverson, tied to intentional safety interlock defeat and command decisions under known unstable conditions. Dana set her pen down and said, "Forward full cooperation packet. No indemnification for willful override." Finance followed with the final insurance disposition. Partial payment for injury response and collateral losses. Denial sustained for major equipment and interruption segments linked to deliberate bypass. Nobody argued. The numbers were already baked into forecasts, and the reputational hit had moved from rumor to vendor scorecards. Quality then reported the customer portal status shift after 4 audits and destructive testing. Conditional hold is lifted to monitored green, Priya said, only after they reviewed Kelly's refusal log, machine telemetry, and corrected authorization matrix. Delayed systemic consequence resolved in scene. Cash holdback released in tranches, but only after proof of governance change. That evening, with Base C still under repair scaffolding, Dana asked Kelly to stand with her on the overlook and review the final corrective action board before sign-off. The board listed new controls in block print. 2-person override authorization eliminated. Manager badge cannot command cycle under active safety inhibit. Mandatory independent thermal verification after any cooling anomaly. Automatic quality hold after first torn startup casting. And stop work protection language posted at every cell. Dana held a marker, then handed it to Kelly. "Write the line we missed," she said. Kelly wrote in firm capitals at the bottom, "Mechanism overrules rank." Dana read it once and nodded. "That goes into onboarding." They stood in silence for a moment while contractors below measured platen geometry with laser trackers and muttered measurements back and forth. The bay smelled like cutting fluid and fresh paint instead of burnt oil. Different problem set. Better one. Before she clocked out, Kelly went to EHS to close the last physical evidence loop. The technician returned her tablet and a static bag with a release form attached. "Forensic image retained per policy, original device cleared for return," he said. She signed and checked the serial number against her receipt. Match. On a shelf behind him sat sealed bins labeled Cell 7 Incident. Broken insert section, guard fragments, severed coolant manifold, tagged sling, and printed stills from the red stack light sequence. Nothing missing, nothing abandoned. She asked one final question. "Any witness never filed?" The technician checked the roster. Material handler from aisle never submitted a statement despite outreach. Not material to causality with existing footage. Thread noted as unresolved by person, resolved by evidence sufficiency. When she walked back through Bay C, she stopped at the edge of the rebuilt cell frame where Cell 7 would return after recertification. The old red stack light sat on a bench tagged for disposal, lens crazed by heat, but still intact enough to pulse when test power hit. A contractor flicked the test switch. It blinked once, twice, steady interval. Same 3-second cadence from the night Brent had called caution obsolete. Kelly watched it and felt no need for speeches. Physics had already delivered the verdict, and the paperwork had enforced it. Brent had lost his job, then his shield, then his case position. Luis was healing. Janelle's data had become policy. Her own badge was active. Her refusal stood. And the plant now trained new hires with the clip where she said no and logged why. She clipped her gloves to her belt, checked the boundary paint, and headed for the time clock as the shift horn sounded. Because in a foundry, the strongest moral statement was still the same one. Run the process right, or do not run it at all.